Good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events. And tonight we have Riley Sager, brand new book, Survive the Night, much anticipated all over the world. Riley was kind enough to sign a batch for us here, and we have just a handful left. I feel like a used car salesman, but we really do in this case. So I'll put the link in the comments field if you'd like to grab one of our last remaining copies. And also May Cobb is joining the discussion tonight. She's going to be talking to Riley and Barbara. And we did a virtual event with May, what was it, maybe a month ago?
May.
Yeah. Yes.
May and May, okay.
May and May, right.
And we still have a handful of signed copies of her book too.
Look at the cool illustration too. Did you notice?
Yeah, it's got a little martini there. And bookmark everything, or is this bookmark? So I'll put a link to that in the comments field as well. And so if you have questions for Riley or May or Barbara, go ahead and put them in, and I'll be reappearing about a half hour, 45 minutes into the show. So Barbara, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It's so much fun. Patrick vanishes and then we summon him back up again. It's like, magic. I love it. So let me also mention if Riley disappears, he's in a thunderstorm area, but don't panic because he will come back on his phone. We've already had that discussion. And here in Scottsdale, we put a generator in our house because it was really shaky for a while. So those of you who've had some unfortunate Zoom experiences, you are not alone. Anyway, Survive the Night. Great cover, Riley. How do you, it's electric and lots of colors. Did you have any input into this design?
Not necessarily. I said, I think maybe I'd like this. And then they kind of made it their own, and I saw it. I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely perfect. And it really pops, doesn't it? Like the colors, the orange and the blue is just a great color combo. I love it.
Well, it does. And the headlights are, significant, as we will discuss as you and May get into this. But I do think in a book like this, a sort of abstract cover is a really good idea. So Riley, for those of you who don't know him, this is his fifth thriller. Try it again. This is his fifth thriller under the name Riley Sager, which is a pseudonym. So that makes him cool and mysterious, right? And now you all want to know who he is, and we're not going to
much more cool and mysterious than I really am in real life. Yeah.
It's the author persona. It's like donning a cloak of invisibility, but the other way around.
Mm-hmm. This is it's my stage name where all the magic happens, and then I go back to being Clark Kent.
I love it. Right. Anyway, his first novel, Final Girls, was a big bestseller and won the ITW Thriller Award for Best Hardcover Novel. His other books are The Last Time I Lied, Lock Every Door, Home Before Dark, which received the Crimson Scribe Award. What's that?
Suspense Magazine named it the best book of 2020, which was crazy. Yeah.
No, that was great. That was your kind of haunted house book.
That was my Amityville horror type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Bless our last conversation was about that book, which I thought was terrific. There was some Agatha Christie tropes. There was some Gothic tropes. There was, it was wonderful.
A book within a book. Yeah. Craziness.
No, it was brilliantly conceived. So is part of the reason you write standalone thrillers so you can do different kinds of stories without repeating casts?
That is definitely part of it. I really like each book is like a new project and a new discovery and a new thing to build. And that's really fun for me. And also, like, my previous writing experience was a series. And when you're working on a series, you grow attached to the characters. And then when your publisher says, we don't want any more of these, it kind of breaks your heart a little bit. And so I was like, yeah, I'm good with standalones. And I really enjoy writing them. I don't think I would ever do a series or a sequel or anything, because I do like the world building and creating a different universe for each book.
Well, that's exhausting in lots of ways, but stimulating. So good for you. I mean, every author has a different toolbox. So May, your book, The Honey Wives, do you agree with Riley that going to standalones and complete stories and new casts is the way you want to operate?
I think so. I really do like to get in, create it, and then get out. I don't really feel called to write series, although I do enjoy them. But for me, I really do want to, make the world as, vibrant as it can be, and then step out. And a lot of people have asked if the Hunting Wives will have a sequel, and I don't see that at all. So yeah, I enjoy the standalones.
Plus, everybody can die. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a disadvantage in the series, is you're pretty sure there'll be one survivor, but everybody's in jeopardy. So, Riley, you clearly are a big fan of May because you blurbed her book, and May is a big fan of you. So, why don't I just butt out here and let May take over and chat with you?
Excellent. Thanks.
Yeah, and don't butt out. Please feel free to butt back in anytime. But yes,
Yes.
I've been a massive fan of Riley's ever since Final Girls, and we were lucky enough. No, he wasn't lucky enough. I was lucky enough to be on a panel with him back in 2018 up in Connecticut, and it was like a horror writing panel at the Westport Library, and that's how we first met and became friends. And he was just so generous and gracious to this very new indie author that didn't have much of a clue. And you were so humble, Riley, and also so very encouraging. So thank you. So yes, I'm just a huge fan. And I honestly, I mean, standalones, I think it is challenging to keep coming up with something that's equally, if not better than your last book. And what is your secret? Like, cause you've done that, I mean, I love them all equally. Like I would love all my children, but this one knocked me out. I mean, I really did have trouble reading and focusing during the pandemic, but it was like one sitting, I flew through it, had to know tell us your secret right now.
I wish I knew, because then I would like teach courses or something, and then never have to write books. I could just be like, here's how you write these books. No, I really I don't know. It's really just, I get an idea, and then I just think about the idea and explore the possibilities, and then I write the idea. And it sounds so simplistic, but it's really like, that's it. Now, in the case of Survive the Night, there was a bit of not a strategy per se, but like my previous book, Home Before Dark, it just was so complex and so difficult to finish and revise and get right, that I was just in a state of exhaustion after it. But when you are contractually obliged to do another book for the very next year, like you don't have time to like really take a break. And so I was like, okay, I need an idea that is like the complete opposite of Home Before Dark's complexity. I want something that is narratively simple. Like it can be emotionally complex and complex with the characters, but just the basic plot has got to be bare bones. And to me, the idea of two people in a car speeding down a highway at night, and one of them suspects the other of being a serial killer, is about as basic and simple and bare bones as you can possibly get. And so I explored this idea with like the intention of just going in a completely different direction than Home Before Dark.
That's so interesting, because it's the way you're describing it sounds like you went in what you're calling maybe a simpler direction, but I feel like it's such a hard thing to pull off because you don't have all these external things that you can draw on, so it is about the character building, and you made it so unbearably tense in that car. It was like, and don't get me started on the diner scene, because that was so tense. But yeah, I'm really in awe, because I think I shared with you that when I got to the end, I actually cried because I was that emotionally invested in the character Charlie, which doesn't usually happen in thrillers. I don't usually cry when I read crime fiction. But wow, you did such a great character arc for her. It was so beautiful. And I know that you've spoken some about how Charlie is the most like you from all the
Yes.
characters you've written. That's true? Like, not just because she was a film studies major like you, but are there other reasons?
Oh, I mean, a little bit. Like Charlie is, she is a college student, and her best friend and roommate was recently murdered by a man known as the campus killer. And Charlie is just grief-stricken and guilt-ridden, and she is just an emotional and psychological wreck. And so she's like, I need to leave campus, and I need to leave like right now. And so she goes to the campus ride board, which the book takes place in 1991. And if you were a college student in the 90s and probably the 80s and 70s, but back in the day in colleges, if you needed a ride home or close to home, you would go to the ride board, and there people would put up their names and their phone numbers for strangers to call them and say, sure, you can ride along with me for several hours alone in a car. And people did this all the time and didn't think twice about it. And so at the ride board, Charlie meets a fellow student named Josh, and he's going in the same direction she is. And so they agree to share the ride from college in New Jersey to Ohio. And no sooner do they basically reach the highway that Charlie starts to suspect that Josh isn't quite who he says he is, and that he might be a very, very dangerous man. And there's no escape because they are careening down a highway. And so Charlie's thing is she is a film studies major, and I was a film studies major in college in the 90s. So that's one thing we have in common. But another thing Charlie does is she immerses herself in movies. Like when she's sad, when she's upset, when she's stressed, which is for her always now, she just retreats into cinema. And so she just loses herself in movies. And I have a tendency to do that as well during like very stressful times where, like, you know, if I'm sick, if I'm really, really depressed, it is like crawl into bed and put on a Disney movie is my go-to like therapy.
The Wish Dragon. We did that the other night. Have you seen The Wish Dragon?
No, I haven't.
Well, I mean, it's, did you like Kung Fu Panda?
I haven't seen that one either.
Oh, Riley, you haven't been depressed then for a while. No, I mean, it's interesting because, it's a kind of, you're right. It's a way to kind of just chill out and, relax. And one of those Disney movies that's really aimed at a younger audience, certainly, well, everybody's a younger audience than I am, but nonetheless, it's relatively simple and you can just enjoy it as opposed to, let's say, watching Bosch, in which you're all just like, grabbed by the throat, and it can be an exhausting thing to watch it. So I think I really agree with you that there are moments when you can't really beat a Disney movie.
And especially like, or any movie that you are comfortable with or familiar with. Like movies can sometimes be just a warm blanket. And so like if it's a movie you've seen like a dozen times before, there's just something comfortable about it. And so that's, yeah, I kind of retreat to like Mary Poppins.
That's so interesting. I have an eidetic memory, so I never watch a movie twice. I just, there's no point in my watching it twice because I could remember it from the very beginning. So I know other people who watch them or reread books, and that's not my life experience. So I'm always interested that how that works for people. So thank you for bringing that up. Sorry, May.
No, and that's really cool. You have that kind of a memory, Barbara. I love
is
that.
very, very cool.
I was born with it. It wasn't like, anything I did, but you'd be surprised how difficult it can be sometimes if you have that. That's the reason I can't read anything electronically, because I can remember the pages that it was on, but you can't do that if it's an electronic text. There is no page, right?
Wow.
So I'm a huge pain to publishers and all, because they say, oh, here's, download this and all that. I say, no, absolutely
The
not.
e-galley. You're like, no.
No. So it makes me a pain, but no, I'm really interested because I know there are people who do watch, movies many, many times, or who every 10 years reread a favorite book or something. And I think what I'm saying is that I'm missing the comfort of that. And, that's why I was interested in Riley saying that, because it's like a soothing thing, right? A self-soothing kind of an activity. which in a stressful world is an excellent idea, particularly if you're writing terrifying books like Survive the Night. Wow. So I have a question without a spoiler, which is, you've mentioned that she gets into the car and they're careening down the highway and almost instantly she begins to suspect that Josh. So without spoiling anything, can you tell us, what signals or what comes off Josh that makes her so on edge about it?
It is a little spoilery, but
Oh, then don't do it.
no, let's just say like the first thing she notices is that he kind of, when he's loading her stuff, and this is like in the very like first chapter, and he's loading her stuff into the trunk of the car, he like does it in a way so from where she's standing, she cannot see into the trunk of the car. And so there's so there you go. Like, and there is something in that trunk that he does not want Charlie to see. And so, but it really is like, when I came up with the idea, I was like, oh, very simple. But then I realized when I started writing, like, how do you maintain suspense when it is mostly two people in a car talking? And so the dialogue had to do a lot of heavy lifting, and there was a lot of going back and revising the dialogue and rereading and futzing and just making sure like every word they say to each other matters, because it starts to become like a mind game where she starts to suspect him and he starts to suspect that she suspects him without letting on that. And they're just, and like they play some, everyone sort of plays like car games on long trips, and they play a game of 20 questions that I tried to make as utterly harrowing as possible. And it's hard to be like, how can you make 20 questions scary? And I hope, and I think that I did make a game of 20 questions intensely scary.
Extremely scary. It was so tense. That whole scene was just, and you're right, the real fun of it was the cat and mouse quality. And it, yeah, like I was saying, you would think it's a simple thing, but it is incredibly hard to keep the suspense going. But you really did a great job. And that's why it's such a great, almost like more psychological suspense than thriller, at least in those moments, because you're really in, Charlie's head for the most part. I know Josh has POV too, which I wanted to ask about. Normally you do like first person, and for this it was third person. Did it just come naturally to you with the story, or did you consciously want to shift out of first person?
It was because the narrative required it.
Okay.
And again, to say more would be a spoiler, but like it was like it was the first time I knew very early on that I'm like, oh, I can't really do first person here, I have to do third person, and I haven't done that yet. And so, gosh, let's hope it works. And
Oh, yeah.
and there was a little bit of a concern on my part of, my readers are used to first person, and I was thinking like, oh, are they going to be thrown for a loop a little bit by this? And I think maybe some of them are at first when you start reading it, and they're like, oh, this is not quite what I expected. And that was another concerted effort to give them something that they might not be expecting from me. Like I wanted to try something just a little bit different and a little bit new.
Yeah. No, I
And
think
that's the
it's
same
great.
goes with like the narrative. Like all of my other previous books had like this dual timeline thing going on, some more than others, but there was always like some chapters in the past and some chapters in the present, and sometimes like it collides and things like that. And I wanted to not do that at all. And so like Survive the Night is almost like a real-time thriller.
Mm-hmm.
Like I forget the exact amount of time that takes place in the book. I think it's 6 hours, maybe 5, something like that. And that's kind of about as long as it will take someone to read the book, is like about 6 hours. And so I wanted it to feel like they were in the front seat with Charlie, riding along with her in real time.
It very much felt like that, which kept it so suspenseful.
And again, I didn't think about whether it's going to be hard or not when I thought of it. And it wasn't until I'm writing it where I'm like, okay, I would even go so far as being like, okay, let's sort of read this and time it out and see if maybe I'm taking too long or too. So it was like a lot of messing with to keep getting the timing just right, to sort of keep that momentum.
And I love how you don't have chapters, but it's like almost like screenplay direction, like interior car at night, exterior diner. I thought that was so clever and,
That was
and
almost the
perfect for
title
this.
that
Oh,
I
yeah?
was thinking of, Interior Car Night.
Awesome.
And I got away from it because an author named Charles Yu came out with an amazing book called Interior Chinatown.
Oh, okay.
That won the National Book Award, I believe. And so I was like, yeah, that just seems, they're not anything alike at all. But then I was like, maybe that's not the best idea to try to title it Interior Car Night. And also my editor probably would say, we need a different title.
No, that's really smart, but I like that title, but I love Survive the Night. That's such a great title too. Don't you think, Barbara?
I do. There's an urgency in it. Survive the night implies that, maybe you won't. So well, it does, so I mean, it's scary right up front. I was thinking, I'm trying to remember who I was talking to the other day, but it was a book set back in maybe the 1950s, in which the author informed me, somewhat to my surprise, that it was perfectly normal for young women to hitchhike in order to go anywhere. Maybe it was set in Ireland. I think it was. Might have been Sarah Stewart Taylor. Anyway, I wasn't encouraged to hitchhike when I was a young girl, certainly. And so I was really interested that she said that. But Riley, when you were talking about the campus message board, it's almost like hitchhiking, but there's a certain security or something. I mean, this is not just a random person on the road, some trucker who's, pulling up and you don't know. I think the idea would be if you met on the college message board, the ride board, that there would be some safety in that these would be two people from a community and, responsive to each other and the whole bit. So did you think about that, when you set this up as the message board, that there would be maybe a spurious idea of safety involved if you accepted a ride from somebody?
Yeah, I mean, well, Charlie is a very complicated character, and she has a very good reason for wanting to leave as fast as she does, and I do explore that later. But there is like sort of a trust issue where, I mean, she, he's at the ride board and he's wearing a university sweatshirt, and so of course he's a student, and he might look a little bit older than the average student, but there are grad students there. And so she doesn't think like, this is a dangerous man I'm about to agree to get in the car with. So there is a bit of, she might be a little bit too trusting when she shouldn't be. But also at the same time, back then, I think a lot of us were too trusting than we should be.
Well, but it was a mechanism set up.
And I look at,
don't you think it must have been approved by the college? I mean, they probably wouldn't have told.
Oh, it is. Oh, it's all, yeah. It's basically college sanctioned hitchhiking, kind of. Yeah. Like I
right. Yeah, exactly.
And there was the ride board was massive. And like at all times of the year, there was just, and especially like near the holidays or the end of the semester, it was just plastered with people like, please, I need a ride to, Albany or someplace like that. And you did hear, like, when I say horror stories, not like the kind of things I write, but like a friend of mine, she got a ride on the ride board with like 3 strangers, and on the highway there was an accident and the highway was shut down, and she was in this car with basically strangers like overnight, just sitting on the highway. And she's just said it was so horrible because like they just don't at all. And so just imagine being in a car overnight with a person you don't like. Like that just, yeah.
Well, there's not a lot of space in a car. It's a pretty intimate space. And
Mhm.
whoever is driving, has the edge because they have control. So, there are a lot of movie scenes with people in cars and, stuff going on that I often think must have been hard to orchestrate if you were the director doing that. So, I mean, you've taken the idea of an Agatha Christie country house and compressed it into a car, which I think is really kind of nifty. I mean, that's a sort of, it's almost a locked room. And it's not a locked room in the sense that you don't know how people got in and out or how the murderer accomplished the crime and left the room locked or anything. So I don't think locked room is a fair description. I think people use that inappropriately, that
Right.
term. But it's definitely a contained environment. The other thing that's
It's a
cool about it
confined
is
space,
that,
definitely, yeah.
thrillers really have momentum. I mean, classic mysteries, private investigator stories and so forth often stay in a relatively single environment, or maybe you might go from San Francisco down to Palo Alto or something. But a thriller, they always move along a landscape, and they can be international, they can do all. So when you put them in a car and send them out, I mean, that's a great thriller structure, don't you think, Matt?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's so fresh too. I can't think of one that's been done like that recently or maybe ever, except for maybe like the film noir stuff that the book pays such nice, homage to. And I like how you said that it's like a film noir Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah,
um,
that was the initial idea that popped into my head was film noir Little Red Riding Hood. And I'm like, that has potential. And
Yeah.
so we have Charlie in her red coat, literally trying to
Yes.
get to grandmother's house.
Yeah.
And
And there's the wolf.
she gets a ride with the big bad wolf. Yeah.
And I also like, so I mean, of course, because it's one of your novels, there's a lot of twist, but there's a certain twist in the middle that I audibly gasped when I read. And I know you know what I'm talking about,
I
Riley.
do.
Did you know that in the beginning when you started writing, or did that come to you as you were writing?
No, I knew, like, when I first had the idea of, like, okay, girl in car with killer, it was like, where do you go from here? Because it just, you it it's hard to maintain like the momentum that like Barbara was talking about. And so I knew I needed to know where the stops were going to be along the way, kind of. And I knew,
Mhm.
I definitely knew I needed to figure out where we're going to end up, how we were going to get there, what route we were going to take. That I sort of left to chance and discovery and the writing. Like normally, as we talked when you and I talked when your book came out and we did it, I normally am a huge outliner,
Yeah.
and I've been getting away from that ever so surely. And with this one, I just felt like if I outlined it all too much, it would just feel flat and not have like the spontaneity that I wanted. And so yeah, there was really no outlining, but I knew the steps along the way, including the twist you're referring to,
Hmm.
sort of
Hmm.
near the midway point. Yeah.
That twist, I mean, I still think about it. I did not I did not see that coming. Wow. And of course the twist at the end, which I'm not going to spoil your book for everybody that's watching, but just yeah, it's amazing. And I'm really glad to hear, since I might have certain plot points or things that I know that have come to me from the outset, but I don't really like to outline either. So it's really refreshing to hear you say that, that you got away from that with this book.
Yeah, it was so constricting to me after a while. Like, and it it was honestly, it was with Lock Every Door where I outlined it all and I was following the outline, and then halfway through the writing of the book, it occurred to me that the outline was wrong and I was going in the wrong direction, and I had to because I could feel it. I'm like, I feel like me trying to want to pull away from the outline. I'm like, no, I'm going to follow this outline. And it just wasn't working yet. I kept writing. And finally, I'm like, if I follow this outline, this book is going to be terrible. And I'm going to have to rewrite it all anyway. So I took the outline and I chucked it and sort of started over, basically. And
Wow.
so since then, I just do not trust outlines anymore, which is crazy
Yeah.
because I used to be like, I would preach outlining to everyone, be like, no, you have to outline, you have to. And now I'm like, let's just wing it, everyone.
I like it. What
Is
do
it
you
easier?
think?
Well, I was going to say, let's remember that you had written other books before you took off on this Riley Sager venture. So I wonder if you would, I wonder if that experience didn't ground you in a way that made it easier for you to write these kinds of books. I mean, surely just finishing one book is a huge asset for an author, just to know that you actually got all the way through a book, even if it needs revision, even, if it wasn't successful, that doesn't really matter. It was completing the project, that really counts. So do you find that, when you decided to be Riley Sager and do this other sort of book, at least you had grounded yourself in a great many things that probably, made this an easier journey for you.
Yeah, I had my habits already in place. And like, I think that those writing habits I used were good for those other books when I was writing under my real name. And it's taken me a while to kind of figure out, like, okay, what do the Riley Sager books, what habits are needed to write those? And that it's evolved. And I've like, things that worked for me back then might not work as well for me now.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's what should you chuck, so to speak, in
Yeah.
order to, I mean, it's sort of like the butterfly, from the chrysalis. It's a really interesting idea. I wonder, if changing names and changing persona isn't a really interesting thing for a writer to do, in the sense that you can keep some of your skill set, but you can really reinvent yourself when it would be harder. I mean, this comes up all the time. I mean, there's hardly a day that goes by that an author doesn't say to me, should I change my name? Or, I want to write this, should I undertake it under another name and all? And, there's really no pat answer to that question. So much of it depends on the personality of the author, or the history they have, or what they want to write. And, for some people, like, let's take Ruth Rendell, for example. She, wrote a particular kind of book. I mean, she wrote Wexfords, and then she wrote some great standalones. But when she wanted to go off in a completely different way, she took up the name Barbara Fine. And it wasn't to hide the fact that she was Ruth Rendell. It was to brand these other books in a way that her Rendell audience would have an alert that it was going to be a different reading experience, right? Elizabeth Peters wrote very different books as Barbara Michaels, for example. So those are authors who, wanted to separate different kinds of works and go on. But other authors are either trying to escape a failed past, or or they think that the audience, oh no, there was nothing personal there. Or, or sometimes publishers push you, if your sales were so dismal that if they publish you a new thing under your old name and anybody looks up your sale. See, that to me is such a weird thing. As an independent bookstore, I never care what a person's track record is. It wouldn't even occur to me to look up and see, okay, May, you wrote a first book Before the Hunting West with a small publisher, and it wouldn't occur to me to go and say, okay, she sold like 13 copies. Well, I don't even know how it went, but let's say it was an unsuccessful book instead of a successful book. I wouldn't care. But if you're operating in a Barnes and Noble or some other universe, where buyers go and say, well, what's the track record for this person? And so that could really kill you in a new project if your old track record was a bad one. But that's not part of my world. So, I'd be perfectly happy if you would continue to write these books under your old name. But I can certainly see why it would be a wise idea to change your name if you wanted to, have a different kind of a thing. I mean, that Lisa Unger went through that. I don't know if you know that, but she wrote, it's a really funny story. I hope she won't mind my telling it, but she wrote two or three, can't remember which, 3 books, and they were relatively small books, and St. Martin's published them. And I'm trying to remember if they were set in Santa Fe or something like that. And then one day and we'd met her, she came to the store and the whole bit. And then one day, out of the blue, came a book by this new author, brand new author, Lisa Unger, totally different book. And I bought it for our first mystery club because it was a new author and a totally different book and a really good book, and I liked it. And then they put her picture on the jacket. Patrick said to me, Barbara, we've just released 100 books into the wild. and guess what? It's really so-and-so. And so I felt compelled to do a recall, or at least to tell the people in our club, that we had made an honest mistake. And it was a great book, because it was, but they were welcome to return it because they were there for real first mysteries, and this was not. I got this savage letter from her editor, saying, how could you do that? And, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, why did you change your name? And then I didn't say, why'd you put her cover on the jacket? Her picture on the jacket, which was the really dumb part. And she said, well, we felt she deserved a new start. So that's kind of my point. Lisa's an amazing writer. And, I don't know, I can't even remember what that early name was, but that was sort of the first time I ran into a situation where it was difficult as a bookseller, the position that we ended up in. And all the media reviewed it. I mean, all the, Publishers Weekly, everybody reviewed it as a debut novel. So, there we all were. And I thought it's an interesting ethical problem. See, I like it better when they say right on this book, this is a pseudonym. And I don't care what your original name was, but it does mean, that I'm not going to fall into that situation where I think, oh, look, here's Riley in his very first book. And then I'm going to have to call them all back because we still have that first mystery club. So, there's a lot of considerations into this whole deal. It really is a complicated question for a store like mine, but it's not a complicated question. Barnes & Noble doesn't care.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, like, I got a lot of criticism when Final Girls came out about the pen name. Oh, tons. Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't think that's fair at all, as long as nobody lied and said, that you were a debut author.
No, we did not do that. And that was one thing that, it was, thank God we didn't do that because it would have been a lie. And so,
yeah,
like, I was very pleased when, I won the ITW Thriller Award. It wasn't, best first novel.
Right.
It was best hardcover novel. Because I think, like, had I been nominated
for best first novel, it would have been dishonest. Yeah,
I would have been like, it's not. And I, thank you, no, I don't want to be. So, but it's all about business, and it's all about branding. Sure. And it's a, luckily now, like, I think like the whole name thing, no one cares. At least in my situation, no one cares anymore, because they know it's like, my real name is on the copyright page of all my books.
I know, you can look it up. I'll tell you my favorite story, and then I'll shut up and let May continue. But this came up, I've always remembered it. It was a truly great moment. I've said this before, so people watching this probably going to go, God, she's going to tell this story again. But there was an author who made a whole career out of basically writing under other names. And this particular author wrote Coffee, Tea, and Me, which was a huge bestseller. A, he was a guy, and B, it was a pen name. And it was so successful that he went on and wrote 6 more books following Coffee, Tea, or Me. So we did an event with him. It was a him. And I was baffled by the fact that a great many people who came into the room were wearing old Pan American uniforms, stewardess uniforms. And I thought, what the hell? Because we were there over a mystery, a Jessica Fletcher mystery. And I thought, why are all these people showing up in airline costumes? It didn't make any sense. And so it came out that he had written these books. But the part I loved, and the reason I brought this up, was that although he wrote them all under a pseudonym, he dedicated every single one of them to himself. It's his real name, which I thought was just so fabulous. and nobody apparently ever noticed. So there's a lot of, you can really have a lot of fun with these things if you pay attention. But that's my personal favorite story of how that worked out.
I love it. Well, so for my next one, I think I'm going to have to dedicate it to myself, but give myself a pen name for the dedication, like my alter ego, whatever that is. I want to dedicate a book to myself. I like that. Riley, I do have a question. I thought also what was so fresh and ingenious with this is that, Charlie does have that movie in her mind thing where sometimes she doesn't know what's real or what maybe she's imagined. And I thought it was such a fresh take on the unreliable narrator. Because she is and she isn't. Like, she's not really intentionally lying to the reader. She herself is trying to piece together whether or not what she's experiencing is reality or not. Can you speak about that at all? I loved that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. So Charlie has a thing, and it's almost like a classic Hitchcockian psychosis that doesn't exist in real life, but it does in the world of the book. It does. And she has hallucinations, but she doesn't call them hallucinations. She calls them movies in her mind. And it is an absolute defense mechanism. So when things get too crazy and stressful for her to emotionally deal with, a flick switches. She says, it's like a projector turning on in her brain. And so she starts to perceive things as a movie, because when you're watching a movie, you're at a safe remove from the events that are unfolding. And so it's how she dealt with the death of her parents when she was a teenager. It was how she dealt with the murder of her roommate. And so it was always not necessarily a good thing, but it was a helpful thing for her mentally. Mm-hmm. If you get in a car with a stranger that you think might be a killer and you start to get really stressed and a movie in your mind happens, then you just don't know what's sometimes real and what sometimes is your imagination. And then if you're with someone who picks up on that and might be able to exploit it to his advantage. So it is more mind games. And one of them is she's actually playing mind games with herself. So there are moments in the book that are movies in her mind, but she doesn't know it's a movie in her mind. So the reader doesn't know it's a movie in her mind. And then sometimes it's real, but she thinks it's not. And so it was all part of a thing. It was one of the things I came up with to keep her in the car for as long as possible and to keep the suspense going. And when I came up with it, it's okay, so she's a film major. She loves movies. She immerses herself in movies. This is another aspect of her character. And so I really tried to, it all comes back to her and her character and what she's going through and what she's been through in the past. And also it was a lot of fun to just toy with the readers by being and this scene, not real. This scene, maybe it's real. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And it worked so well, especially because, and this won't spoil anything, but she doesn't know what she really saw or didn't see the night her roommate was murdered. So that totally added to the suspense of, is she going to be able to remember it? Well, then I'm going to stop talking because I don't want to spoil that tense moment. But it's I found that to be so refreshing. And I also, I loved this novel so much because it was so character based, and you really do feel so much for Charlie, and you're so invested in her and rooting for her, even with all her messiness and vulnerability. And I just, yeah, you really pulled that off so well. You really write the female perspective so well, which I've said time and time again. And I was wondering, for your next one, is that going to be female perspective too, or do you know yet? Or can you tell us any about your next one? I'm just so
Oh, May,
curious.
you're not going to get any information from me about my next book. People like this, that's a funny thing. In all the interviews I've been doing and all these events, like for the past week or so, like everyone has been like, so your next one. And I'm like,
Because we want to know, but I
not
understand. I
saying
understand wanting to
anything.
keep that. Yeah. Yeah.
It's because it's pretty much it's done. It's with my editor, and now like soon we're just gonna start making it even better. And just the less I say,
Hmm.
the better, because it's crazy. It's good. It's
What
crazy.
about you, May? Are you working on it'll be your third book?
Yeah. I just actually got, I got sent a copy edit. So it got accepted.
Awesome.
And I know I'm very happy about that. So I've just started working on the next one. And if y'all would like to meet me afterwards and help me and tell me what I'm doing, that'd be great.
Zupa's Writer School. I love that. Speaking of Writer School, I have a question for Riley, and then let's call Patrick up. But when you were talking about that, I mean, sometimes contracts actually specify how many words or how long a book has to be. But I think there are stories that are longer and shorter, just depending on the story. Did you feel like you could have written this book shorter, but because of, a kind of, I don't know if it's a natural rhythm or if it's a contractual thing or something, it had to be a certain length? Or, could you have made it leaner if you'd felt like it?
It was pretty lean to begin with. I have to say, like, I was actually worried when I turned it in, like, I'm not sure this is, because I don't have like it, I think the contract is like roughly 90,000 words. And that could be, I think Home Before Dark was like 105,000 words. So it's not like this set in stone thing, but this one came in a lot shorter than that. And I did that on purpose. Like I really kind of wanted to write a book that could be read in one sitting or close to it. And because lots of people say like, oh my gosh, I loved your book. I read it in one day. And I always thought, I worked like 9 months on that book, like savor it, darn it. Yeah. But I understand like the excitement of wanting to binge something. And we are definitely in a binge culture. And so for this one, but with the concept, I was like, I think this could be a read in a day.
Right. Well,
Maybe
if you
read in a
padded
sitting
it,
book.
you would ruin it. And so, one of the questions that comes up a lot at the store is that people say, how do you know when the book is done? How do you know when you've gotten to the end? And I always find that an interesting question. And most writers have a kind of a built-in, thing that says, I'm going to go this length. I mean, they're used to it. But I think there are stories that should be shorter and stories that should be longer. I mean, we published Drive, when we started Poison Pen Press, and Drive was like, what? Patrick, remind me. Patrick, come and join us. How long was Drive? It was 35,000 words. How long was it? Do you remember?
It was short. It was shortish. I don't know about words, but it was about 100 and what, 25, 35 pages.
Well, it was definitely under 50,000 words. And in fact, it had been turned down in New York because it wasn't, quote, a book. But my husband, who's the publisher of Poison Pen Press, absolutely loved it and felt like one more word would be one word too many, for this particular book. And I always loved Marilyn Stasio's review in the New York Times because that was her review. It was really short. It said, James Salas has written a perfect book. And that was the whole review. So it was great. So that's an extreme example, of how a story could be truly short, but truly wonderful. And then, we're the Outlander bookstore, so we're used to books that are, like hundreds of thousands of words. And so, I don't think there's any rules or any formula for the whole thing. I think it really is the story. But I think May's made an excellent point that this book is just as long as it needed to be.
I
Right.
tried to make it like the exact, like
Not
the
too
right
many
one.
notes, Mr. Mozart, which, you know, I thought I've always loved that line, so I try to use it. Patrick, what, do you have any
Yeah.
comments or questions from the audience?
There are a few comments. Let's see here. Okay, where is it? This is a good one. Sarah, it's not a question. She just says, Home Before Dark is the only one I haven't read because I'm terrified of snakes and rumor has it, ...
The rumors are true. Yes.
Rumors were true.
Ooh,
Let's see. Okay, here's one. Inquiring minds want to know, what does your pillow say behind you?
Oh, if you were in my novel, I would have killed you off by now. And that was a gift from my mother. It was a Christmas present.
write a book right there. Oh, wow, that is so cool. You know, one of the things that's fun about Zoom is room decorations. I mean, it's really fun to sort of tour people's setting for, you know, we're in the kitchen, we're in the office. Karen Slaughter's done a wonderful job, don't you think, Patrick, of kind of expanding her office behind her as we've zoomed along. Her office
There's a
has taken on
voyeuristic
more
quality to all
dimensions.
this.
Huh?
So there's a voyeuristic quality to all this Zooming.
There
Well,
really
you know,
is. Yeah.
it's more personal. It's more
Yeah.
intimate. I mean, the bookstore is always the same, roughly. You know, so I do think that seeing authors in their, you know, native habitat is a really nice thing for readers. You know, it's an
Yeah, this is
opportunity to bond with them
the
more.
room I write in. This is the room I write in, so it feels
it?
appropriate to be like, yeah, I write in that chair. At that coffee table is my desk. So
Oh my God, you're bending over your laptop? You're going to wind up.
no,
with-
I keep the laptop and I'm terrible. Like the laptop is in my lap literally as I'm typing, and there probably is some hunching going on. Yeah, I'm gonna need a chiropractor in about like 2 years.
You're right. You're going to have that S-shaped back and shoulder. Where do you write, May?
Just right here, this is like a corner of my bedroom. It's very simple. It's a tiny desk, and I've got like a Legend of Zelda sign up here that my best friend gave me. And then my bookcase, which has got all of Riley's books back up there. I don't know if you can see.
That's very nice.
Yeah. So I used to have an office, but I found that it kind of intimidated me. So I don't really feel like I'm writing if I'm just in the corner of my room and it's not as much pressure. But that's just a trick I play on myself because, yes, of course, it's a lot of pressure. So, yeah. But are we going to get back to in store soon? And will you continue the Zoom like even after that? Do you think?
We're gonna do both. For example, the other day I got a call and I was asked if we would like to debut Lord Jeffrey Archer. So I thought, sure. And then I realized that, I mean, why not, right? I mean, besides, he's as old as I am, so neither one of us may have a lot more time left. But, you know, there was that chance that he was ever going to come to Scottsdale, you know? So yeah, we're actually doing our first live event since COVID on Tuesday.
Ooh.
And we have 2 booked in August, and then we have a number. I'm leaving here to take Craig Johnson and his wife out to dinner. He's here in Scottsdale doing something, and Craig is going to be live on September 21st at the store. And Dirk Hussler will be live at the store in November. But that's all depending on whether the variants force us all back into, you know, lockdown, so to speak. I don't think that we can be confident that we can do all this stuff in the fall. But yeah, it's our intention to keep the Zoom. But see, we videoed everything out of the store anyway. I mean, you know, we've been doing this for 20 years. So we were on Facebook with all of our events for forever. So why would we change that?
Yeah.
And the interesting question is whether this great big new audience that we've got will continue. And, you know, we don't know that yet because we haven't tried that. When people have more entertainment options, Will they still want to watch a live event? But the great thing is if you put it on Facebook, they can watch it at their convenience. I come back to why we don't do tickets. If you have to do it at a particular time, well, it's like going to a theater, right? If you miss the matinee, it's over. But if you put it up the way we do it, then anybody can watch it anytime. And that's really helpful for time zones too. I noticed we did an event last night for an author whom I love, Stephen Saylor, who's been writing Roman mysteries forever, and he's written this great Roman trilogy. Patrick, did you notice how many of those books went out internationally?
Yeah,
I
it
was
amazing.
watching the shipping, and
Absolutely.
we sent books to Sweden, we sent books to the Netherlands, we sent books all over. Well, that audience was never going to come to Scottsdale,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
And
You
it
know,
was
but
Stephen, it was Stephen Saylor's very first Zoom experience.
it was.
Like, how did you survive this whole year without doing this?
Yeah, how could you avoid that? Wow.
Oh,
I have no idea. I didn't want to, but I mean, and his editor has been his editor for 30 years and all of his books. I have been his bookseller for 30 years and all of his books. We have debuted virtually all of his books, and we all realize the three of us have been together for 30 years,
Amazing.
doing this. In his last book, we did a live event because it took him, 3 years or something to write Dominus from the last book that he did. And I thought, isn't it wonderful that we got to continue it? Even if it was on Zoom, it's still the same. So Patrick, did you try your discussion group as a live back at the store the other
we
night?
did. Yeah, we did our first in-person group again.
But did you have anybody zooming in?
No, not this time. No.
But you might, because that's a really interesting thing too, is if you have a discussion club, for example, it was always limited to the people who could actually show up at the
Right.
store. But with Zoom, you could embrace people who live somewhere else, like Chile or whatever. So I love this technology. I can't imagine giving it up. I think that's been the best thing about COVID. If there is any good thing about COVID.
It has been a silver lining, definitely, because
Did you happen to look at More Than Malice? I mean, the Malice Domestic Convention, which has been a cozy convention forever. It's been like almost all female. They have a tea with Mad Hatter hats, the whole bit. And it's been wonderful, but it's been a very specific kind of convention with a very specific kind of audience. So I thought, because my husband and I were guests of honor or lifetime achievement or something, that at least I could do was sign up to go to it and pay the fee. So I did that, and I looked at the paneling, and the first paneling came up. Here are the panelists: Brad Thor, CJ Box, David Baldacci, and I thought, wait, they were never going to go to the live Malice Domestic. I mean, never. But because it is a virtual thing, they've got international people, they've got people from thriller genres and all sorts of things that, and I thought, that's so wonderful.
they have me.
Are
and
you
Mary
going to
Cobb,
it?
and Carolyn Kepnes and Samantha Downing and
Okay,
yeah, we all did one last week.
Yeah, but I happened to just notice the guys that, I thought were wild.
No, I saw like all these different people. I'm like, wow, that's really cool.
It really is, but I mean, it's a completely different Malice Domestic. So the question is, will they go back to the old form next
Just
year?
Malice now.
Huh?
It's just Malice. No domestic about it.
Just Malice, right? Well, it's called More Than Malice is the actual
More Than
title.
Malice.
But I guess the question I have is, will those kinds of conventions, will they stay virtual so they can be huge like that? Will they go back to live? And if they go back to live, will they be different? Or will they be both? Will they have live panels and live attendance, but will they broadcast this stuff as well?
I hope that, I suspect it will be a hybrid, but I have a feeling that they will go back to being live, because as an author myself, I miss hanging out with other authors in person.
I'm sure you do, but I think the hybrid is the key. Because, let's say you're in Scotland and you want to attend the convention, the odds were poor that you were ever going to go to Bethesda you could, but it would be hard. So I think that a lot of conventions would benefit from being hybrid in the same way.
Well, I
that,
think a lot of American fans would be curious about going to a British convention where, before that technology, it existed, but it never really occurred to anybody to utilize it in that way.
I want to go to Iceland Noir. I mean, it's November in Iceland. How cool is that? And
Yeah.
if I can actually get there, I want to sign up and attend it.
I was asked to go to Iceland Noir this year, and I just didn't feel it was right timing to do that. And I was so torn because I'm like, yeah, I really, really want to go, and wow, this would be really cool to take part, but that's a little too soon.
It's a little scary this fall. Yeah, I mean, we don't know enough to make any firm decisions about the fall. And we need a lot more people to be vaccinated. And, one of the threshold questions for us, we're asking people to come masked on Tuesday night because there isn't really any great way to determine whether the people coming into the store, we made it small anyway, are they vaccinated? And, I don't want the staff to be policemen. What are we going to do? Stand at the door and, you have to show up. I mean, there's a lot of, my husband and I just downloaded the United app because we're going to Wyoming tomorrow. And as part of that, you put in your vaccination, card and registration and so forth. So we're going to have a poison pen app where, if you want to come to, to a live event at the pen, you have to put in your vaccination thing. I mean, who knows? I think there's just a ton of questions that that need to be addressed before we kind of resume where we are. Anyway, that's a really long answer to the comment. Was there anything else now that we've, as usual, digressed?
Well, people are responding to the digressions.
Oh,
And
okay.
so they're saying, they're saying that
weapon.
Yeah, they're just saying how much they enjoy our virtual events, and that that's a lot of people are chiming in saying that we'll still watch your live events. Hybrid would be great. It is really nice to meet, albeit virtually, this whole new crowd of people. I mean, some of them were already Poison Pen customers, but we've made a lot of new friends. And since I'm doing all the comments, I've met some new people just in the comments that I correspond with, which is kind of cool.
It is cool.
Brave new world,
I thought the most interesting one, Karen Slaughter asked me to do an event for a friend of hers who's an Icelandic author, Riley, since we were talking about it. And so I said, sure, because it was Karen and, I like the other author. And so we did the event, and Patrick, I'm trying to remember, we had like 1,000 views and something like 90 of them were in the United States.
Was that the male author?
No, it was Ursa
Sigurðardóttir.
Yeah, but I mean, and a huge number of them were in Scotland. I mean, it was really, the data on it was absolutely fascinating, that essentially it was. And then we did a thing for Brad Thor, and it's something you might want to consider, Riley. It was a book discussion 3 months after the book came out, so we could talk about the ending.
Oh,
and it was huge. No, we had a really great audience for it. We just did one for Brad Taylor too, and that was a lot of fun. It was small, but anyway, there was some guy in New Zealand who was worried he couldn't stay awake, so he emailed his questions to Patrick. And we had people from all over the world. There was a guy from Bulgaria, and so you can't do that, in a live thing. And that was a really great. That was so much fun because we could talk about the whole book.
And that is so much fun to, like, that's something that, and May can probably agree with me here, like, we don't get to do that. Like, occasionally, like, I did, a lot of podcast interviews over the past week, and, one of them said, I have a question about something, but it's a spoiler. And so when the interview was done, and I was like, okay, now do you really want, like, when I'm no longer recording, I was like, okay, here's about the ending and why this happened and what was going on here. And it was just like so much fun to just really get into the nitty gritty of like the spoilers and the ending and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a great idea to do that.
You can talk to me. We might be able to do it in September. You have to give people, not everybody reads a book, the day after they buy it. So I think With Brad, we had a 5-month, but that was just, anyway, let me know, because we thought it was a terrific deal, and we didn't put any restriction on it. You didn't have to. No, I take that back, Patrick. Didn't it? It turned out our software doesn't allow us to do a free thing and register people. I mean, so I think we charged, what was it, like $1? It had to be some minuscule amount of money in
Oh,
order
because
for
you
us
don't want
to.
people
Yeah,
coming
it
in
doesn't
and-
allow you to do it with no
Yeah.
money. So, and that was interesting too, that people were willing to pay, a little bit.
Another interesting thing that we found out was that by doing it as, there's the webinar versus the meeting
Yeah,
format, and people seem to be much shyer if they were up on the screen themselves with the author than if it was, like just Barbara and Riley, or, May and
that's
Riley.
true, because it was just Brad and me, and then they were all invisible, but they
Well,
were.
and then they were typing in their questions as fast as they could go, but when they're on the screen, they just froze.
They did. It's also unnerving because when people talk, it moves the people in the screen around.
Yeah.
And so,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think if we do it, we should stick to which is it, the webinar?
Holly says, I'll pay $1. Let's do it.
Right.
All right,
Well,
Holly.
it's a really interesting idea. I've even thought about the idea that maybe one point we could hire a part-time staff person to actually run a program like that.
Call
If
it
people were
spoilers
willing to
allowed.
pay $5 or something, to show up for stuff like that, it would be of interest. So there's a lot of branching opportunities, for connecting authors and readers and authors with each other, if you start thinking about what we can do with this technology. So I think it's absolutely fascinating. I really love it. Meantime, I would love to have you both at the store. So let's hope that next book
Yes,
you can
fingers
both
crossed.
show up, which would be absolutely wonderful. And if you really want to do a follow-up discussion, I think this book would be an interesting one to do it, Riley. So maybe we can find a moment somewhere in the fall where we could do that. Yay.
I would
All
love to
right.
talk about.
Don't forget, we do have a few autographed copies still coming from Riley, who signed a second batch that we had to send him. There will be a podcast of this available tomorrow, and this event is going to live on our Poison Pen video page forever. So if you didn't see all of it and you want to catch up, you can watch it, you can listen to the podcast. And if you know people that are disappointed they missed it, let them know that they can go to poisonpen.com and click on podcasts or click on Facebook videos. We've had almost 100,000 downloads of the podcast, which I find absolutely amazing. I mean, my husband started it just sort of for fun, and it's turned into a really great thing. So I will send you the links, both of you, to the podcast and the
Thank you,
video,
Barbara.
and it'll be great. It's lovely to see you. Thanks so much.
Great seeing you.
And
Thank you so much.
Good seeing you, May. I miss you. We should
Yeah, I
hang
miss
out
you
in person
too.
Soon-ish.
I
have a
know.
wonderful evening, everybody, and a very happy 4th of July, a safe and happy one. And don't forget, it's a long weekend, so you can read Survive the Night or The Hunting Game while you
Nice.
are, yep, absolutely. Great idea. Good night, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Barbara. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks, Riley. Bye, y'all.